What you release makes space for peace. Buddhist teaching. There is a quiet truth within Buddhist wisdom that many people only discover after life has already exhausted them, after the mind has carried too much for too long, and after the heart has tried to hold what was never meant to stay. This truth states that peace is not something you chase, nor something you build through force or perfectionism, nor something you buy, find, win, or deserve. Peace is something that naturally enters when the unnecessary leaves. It is not an addition to your life, but the open space left behind when you finally release what has been weighing you down. What you release makes space for peace. This single teaching, when deeply understood, has the power to transform the way you relate to your own mind, your past, your emotions, your fears, and the stories you tell yourself on a daily basis. Buddhist teachings emphasize impermanence, non-attachment, and the letting go of the illusions that create suffering. But letting go is not always a conscious choice. Sometimes it is a process of awakening. Sometimes it is the slow realization that what you cling to is no longer in harmony with your path. Other times, it is the sudden collapse of something you thought was unbreakable, and yet, every time you release something that is no longer aligned with your inner truth, you unknowingly create a sacred space for peace to arise. Peace is not found by filling your life with more. Peace is found by clearing away what no longer serves your growth. In this teaching, you will explore the deep meaning behind release as a path toward inner stillness. You will learn why holding on feels natural even when it hurts, why the mind clings to the known even when the unknown offers something better, and why letting go is not an act of weakness but an act of tremendous strength. You will understand how releasing emotional burdens, expectations, attachments, identities, memories, and forms of self-imposed suffering can lead you toward a state of profound clarity and balance. This text is structured into 5 extensive topics, each offering deeper insight into the Buddhist understanding of release. We will look closely at the inner mechanisms of attachment, why the mind resists letting go, and how the process unfolds both psychologically and spiritually. You will see how release shapes your present moment, how it frees the heart from emotional patterns, and how it opens space for the peace that has always been there behind the noise. This teaching is not about abandoning your life or rejecting your desires. It is about freeing yourself from unnecessary suffering by learning to trust the natural flow of existence. Now let us begin with the first topic, where we explore the origins of holding on, why it feels so difficult to release, and how this single act becomes the foundation of inner peace. The human mind is a structure of patterns, memories, associations, fears, and expectations. From the moment you are born, your brain learns to cling to what brings comfort and avoid what brings discomfort. This mechanism is useful for physical survival, but as life becomes more complex, the mind begins to cling to things that no longer help you grow. You cling to opinions because they make you feel right, to relationships because they make you feel needed, to habits because they make you feel safe, to stories because they make you feel understood, and to illusions because they make you feel less afraid. The mind holds on because it believes that stability comes from possession, attachment, and control. And yet, every Buddhist teaching shows that the opposite is true. Stability comes from flow, impermanence, and acceptance of change. To understand why letting go is so transformative, you must first understand why holding on is so instinctive. From childhood, you build a sense of identity based on what you accumulate mentally and emotionally. You learn that success is something you achieve, love is something you earn, and stability is something you cling to. But the deeper truth is that none of these are fixed. What you call identity is a shifting collection of temporary thoughts, emotions, memories, and beliefs. What you call security is a fragile structure built on impermanent conditions. What you call certainty is merely familiarity masquerading as truth. The mind clings to these illusions not because they are real, but because they are known. The unknown represents unpredictability, and unpredictability feels threatening, and so you cling, even when it hurts. You cling to the person who left you because letting go means facing the emptiness they leave behind. You cling to the job that drains you because letting go means confronting the uncertainty of change. You cling to the version of yourself that no longer reflects who you are because letting go means stepping into an identity that has not yet formed. The mind chooses the familiar prison over the unfamiliar freedom. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is identified as the root of suffering. This is not because desire is wrong or emotion is wrong. It is because clinging to what is impermanent creates inevitable pain. Everything that exists is in a state of constant change. Nothing lasts forever. Not your relationships, not your achievements, not your failures, not your youth, not your beliefs, not your fears. Impermanence is the nature of existence. When you cling to something as if it will remain unchanged, you create suffering because reality will always contradict your expectations. Release becomes the pathway to peace, not because life gets easier, but because your relationship with change becomes healthier. The mind also holds on because it confuses possession with identity. When you lose something external, you often feel as if you have lost a part of yourself. If someone rejects you, you interpret it as a flaw in your worth. If a dream collapses, you interpret it as a failure in who you are. If a chapter ends, you interpret it as a sign of inadequacy. But this is not the truth. You are not defined by what leaves your life. You are defined by how you respond to what leaves. The mind attaches your sense of self to things outside of you. But the Buddhist path teaches that your true self is something deeper, something untouched by gain or loss. When you release an attachment, you are not losing yourself. You are returning to yourself. You are peeling away the layers of illusion that covered your original nature. Another reason people hold on is fear of emptiness, silence, space. And emptiness are often misunderstood as loneliness or loss. Yet in Buddhism, emptiness is sacred. Emptiness is where creation begins. Emptiness is where peace resides. Emptiness is the fertile ground where clarity grows. But because emptiness lacks the familiar noise you are used to, it feels vulnerable. You fear the silence because it forces you to meet yourself. You fear the space because it requires you to trust what will come next. You fear releasing because you do not yet know who you will be without what you cling to. But in Buddhist wisdom, emptiness is not something to fear. It is something to embrace because emptiness is the precondition for peace. When you release what is cluttering your mind, your heart, or your life, you create a sacred emptiness that invites peace to enter naturally. Letting go is also difficult because the mind attaches meaning to everything. If a relationship ends, you assign a narrative to it. If a dream fails, you assign a narrative. If someone hurts you, you assign a narrative. These narratives become powerful emotional anchors, making you believe that your past is still present. But the Buddhist path teaches that suffering is not caused by the events themselves, but by the meaning you continue to assign to them. Your interpretation becomes the cage. Your inner dialogue becomes the chain. Your story becomes the weight. When you release the narrative, you release the suffering. The event may have happened, but the story you tell about it does not need to continue. Letting go is not erasing your past. It is releasing the grip that your past has on your present. Another subtle reason the mind clings is the illusion of control. When life feels unpredictable, you attempt to anchor yourself by controlling outcomes, people, emotions, and circumstances. But the more you try to control, the more chaotic life becomes. The world does not bend according to your expectations. People do not behave according to your desires. Emotions do not disappear through force. The Buddhist teaching of surrender is not about passivity. It is about recognizing that true power comes from alignment, not control. When you release your grip on how things must be, you allow life to flow as it is. You create room for peace because you stop fighting reality. Letting go creates inner freedom because it breaks the cycle of suffering caused by attachment. When you stop clinging, your mind begins to expand, your emotional world begins to soften, your spiritual awareness begins to open. You begin to notice that your peace was never lost. It was merely buried beneath layers of resistance. Release is the act of removing these layers. When you release a fear, you create space for courage. When you release resentment, you create space for compassion. When you release a limiting belief, you create space for possibility. When you release a past identity, you create space for transformation. Peace does not come from gaining more control, but from surrendering your grip. Letting go is also an act of trust. It is trusting that life unfolds with wisdom. It is trusting that you are capable of navigating uncertainty. It is trusting that what is meant for you cannot be taken, and what is not meant for you cannot be forced. It is trusting that endings are not punishments but transitions. It is trusting that release is not loss but liberation. Trust is the soil in which peace grows. The more you trust, the less you fear. The less you fear, the more space peace has to enter. Inner freedom arises because release aligns you with the natural flow of life. The river does not suffer because it moves forward. It suffers only when it is blocked. The tree does not cling to its leaves when autumn arrives. It releases them because it understands the cycle. You too are part of nature, and peace comes when you begin to live according to the same principles. You are meant to breathe in and breathe out. You are meant to grow and shed. You are meant to welcome and release. When you honor this rhythm instead of resisting it, peace becomes your natural state. Release is not an instant transformation. It is a practice. It is a way of relating to yourself and the world with softness instead of tightness. It is noticing when you are clinging and asking yourself whether that clinging aligns with who you are becoming. It is choosing to step into the unknown, even when fear whispers that you should stay where you are. It is learning to see emptiness not as a void, but as a space for new beginnings. And so, letting go becomes the doorway through which peace enters. When you stop holding on to what hurts, what drains you, what limits you, or what no longer reflects your truth, you open a pathway to inner calm. This is why Buddhist teachings say that peace is not something you reach. Peace is something you reveal. It is already there. It is simply waiting for space. If you are enjoying this teaching, remember to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next topics and reflections on this path of inner peace. The sacred art of release, how letting go opens the door to peace. Letting go is not a single act, but a continuous journey. A sacred unfolding that challenges every part of the ego that believes peace comes through possession and control. In truth, the essence of Buddhism reveals that peace emerges not through acquisition, but through emptiness, through the dissolution of what is false. It is the moment when the clenched hands of the soul begin to open, when resistance softens, and when acceptance replaces demand. To release is to stop fighting what already is. It is to meet the present moment without an agenda. It is to surrender the illusion that life must bend to your will, and to see instead that life already carries its own divine rhythm. And in this rhythm, when you cease interfering, peace arises naturally. There is an old Buddhist parable of a man who holds a burning coal in his hand while blaming the world for the pain. The fire represents his anger, his resistance, his attachment, his need to control outcomes. He believes the world will burn if he holds on, yet he does not realize that he is only burning himself. Letting go is the moment he opens his hand. Nothing outside changes, but everything inside transforms. The release is internal, yet its effects radiate outward into every aspect of life. That is the power of spiritual release. It is the invisible moment that changes everything visible. When you begin to walk this path of release, you start to see how much of your suffering was self-created. The stories, expectations, and emotional habits you thought were necessary were, in fact, the walls between you and peace. You see that most of what you've been holding on to was simply fear, disguised as logic. The fear of being alone made you cling to people who drained you. The fear of failure made you cling to paths that suffocated your growth. The fear of emptiness made you fill your life with noise and distractions. The fear of losing control made you grasp harder at illusions. But when you begin to let go, layer by layer, you find something extraordinary. The fear begins to dissolve, and in its absence, peace quietly enters. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace is not something you cultivate through struggle, but something that emerges naturally when you cease to resist. Like muddy water that clears when left undisturbed, the mind also becomes still when you stop stirring it with worry, attachment, and control. Release is the act of allowing the mud to settle. The stillness that follows is peace. But to reach this stillness, you must dare to face the discomfort of letting go. Letting go requires faith, not in an external deity, but in the intelligence of life itself. Faith that when something leaves your life, it does so because its purpose has been served. Faith that the void it leaves is not a punishment, but a preparation. Faith that every loss carries the seed of renewal. To release means to allow reality to be what it is without forcing it into your expectations. The mind is a master of conditions. It says, "I will be happy when," and so postpones peace endlessly into the future. It creates conditions for inner stillness that can never be fully met. When the world is calm, when others approve, when the past is healed, when the future is certain. But peace is never a result of external perfection. Peace arises when you stop demanding that life conforms to your ideals. The present moment, with all its imperfection, is already complete. When you stop trying to rearrange it and instead allow it, you touch freedom. Releasing is not only about external attachments, but also about inner identities. The ego thrives on roles: the one who succeeds, the one who suffers, the one who is right, the one who is misunderstood. These roles create continuity for the self, but they also trap you in repetitive emotional patterns. When you identify as the wounded one, you continue to look for pain that validates your role. When you identify as the strong one, you suppress your vulnerability. When you identify as the wise one, you resist being wrong. The spiritual path asks something radical of you. It asks you to release the identity itself, to let go of being anyone at all, because only then can you experience the vastness of consciousness beyond all labels. Letting go, therefore, is not about losing anything real. It is about losing illusions. You cannot lose what is true because truth is not a possession, it is a presence. The love that is genuine will remain even when attachments fall away. The wisdom that is real will remain even when beliefs dissolve. The peace that is authentic will remain even when your world changes. Everything that leaves was only meant to point you toward the eternal. Once you recognize this, you stop clinging. You begin to participate in life with lightness. You begin to love without fear of loss, to give without expectation, to act without the need for reward. This is freedom. In Buddhist meditation, practitioners are taught to observe thoughts and emotions without attachment. When anger arises, they do not suppress it or chase it away. They watch it with awareness. When fear appears, they do not analyze it. They sit with it. This observation itself is an act of release. By allowing the emotion to be what it is without identifying with it, you begin to dissolve its power. Every emotion, no matter how strong, is impermanent. When you release the need to control your inner experience, you open the doorway to serenity. You begin to experience life as it unfolds rather than as you demand it to be. One of the greatest misunderstandings about letting go is the belief that it means indifference. To let go does not mean to stop caring. It means to care without clinging. It means to love without trying to possess. It means to participate fully in life without demanding that it obey your timeline. Detachment in Buddhism is not coldness, but clarity. When you release the need for things to be a certain way, your heart opens wider because it is no longer bound by fear. You can love more deeply because you are not trying to hold on. You can experience joy more fully because you are not afraid it will end. Paradoxically, letting go allows you to experience life more intimately because you are no longer filtering it through expectation. Peace enters the spaces that were once occupied by resistance. Every resentment released becomes an opening for compassion. Every expectation released becomes an opening for acceptance. Every fear released becomes an opening for courage. You do not need to build peace. You need only to remove what prevents it from arising. This is why Buddhist masters often compare peace to the sky and thoughts to clouds. The sky is always there. The clouds only obscure it temporarily. The practice of release is the wind that clears the clouds, revealing the vastness that was always behind them. Letting go is not just an internal process. It transforms the way you live. It changes how you move through relationships, work, conflict, and loss. When you learn to release, you stop arguing with life. You stop trying to fix everything and everyone. You stop expecting permanence from what is transient. You begin to act not from fear or need, but from presence. You become softer yet stronger, quieter yet more alive. Release does not make you passive. It makes you peaceful. And from peace, all wise action arises naturally. This transformation can be subtle but profound. When someone criticizes you, instead of clinging to the need to defend yourself, you can release the reaction. You can listen, feel, and respond from calm rather than ego. When a plan collapses, instead of resisting what is, you can release your attachment to the outcome and see what new possibility is emerging. When the past comes back in the form of regret, you can release the story that keeps replaying and return to this breath, this moment, this presence. Each act of release strengthens your freedom. The more you practice letting go, the more you realize that everything you truly need is already here. You discover that peace was never hidden in the future. It was obscured by your attachments. Release is like cleaning a mirror. The dust was never part of the reflection. It only covered what was already there. When you wipe it away through awareness, forgiveness, and trust, clarity returns. You begin to see yourself and the world as they are, fluid, impermanent, interconnected, and alive. There will be times when letting go feels impossible. The mind will scream for control, and the heart will ache for what is gone. In those moments, remember that you're not asked to let go perfectly. You're only asked to let go gently, to release your grip one breath at a time. Even the smallest act of surrender, a sigh, a moment of stillness, a single exhale of acceptance, creates a shift within you. Over time, these small releases accumulate and transform your entire being. The pain you once feared becomes wisdom. The emptiness you once resisted becomes peace. The silence you once avoided becomes your teacher. There is beauty in the in-between, in the space after you release and before something new arrives. It is in that sacred pause that you meet your true self. Without the noise of attachment, you begin to hear the quiet voice of intuition, the whisper of life guiding you forward. This voice is not loud or demanding. It is subtle and soft. It says you are safe to let go. It reminds you that peace does not need to be achieved. It only needs to be allowed. In the modern world, where productivity and achievement are worshipped, the art of release may seem like weakness. Yet, in the language of the Spirit, release is strength of the highest order. It takes courage to walk away from what no longer serves your growth. It takes faith to trust what you cannot see. It takes deep inner maturity to value peace over validation. Those who can release without resentment have discovered a freedom that nothing external can threaten. Release also teaches humility. You begin to see that you are not the author of every story, not the controller of every outcome. Life moves through you, not for your ego's agenda, but for your soul's evolution. When you release, you step into partnership with existence itself. You stop trying to force doors open and start noticing which ones open naturally. You stop chasing meaning and begin to experience meaning in everything. The paradox of letting go is that the less you cling, the more life gives you what truly belongs to you. In this sacred art of release, forgiveness plays a central role. Forgiveness is the release of resentment that poisons the heart. It is not about excusing the harm done, but freeing yourself from the weight of carrying it. When you forgive, you do not change the past. You change your relationship to it. You reclaim the energy that was bound to bitterness and redirect it toward healing. Forgiveness is a form of release that restores your peace because it breaks the cycle of suffering. The one who forgives is always the one who is freed first. As you continue to walk the path of letting go, you begin to feel a spaciousness inside you. The mind becomes less crowded, the heart less heavy. You start noticing moments of stillness between thoughts, breaths of peace between emotions. These are glimpses of your true nature. They are reminders that peace was never missing. It was only hidden beneath resistance. And every time you release, you uncover more of that original stillness. Release also transforms your relationship with time. You no longer rush toward the future or cling to the past. You begin to inhabit the eternal now. You see that everything you chase already exists in this moment. If only you are present enough to see it. Time becomes less of an enemy and more of a teacher. Each moment of letting go teaches impermanence. Each act of surrender teaches trust. Each loss teaches gratitude. Each silence teaches peace. When you have released enough, a quiet joy begins to emerge, not because life has become perfect, but because you no longer demand that it should be. You accept what comes and what goes with the same grace. You see beauty even in endings, wisdom even in pain, love even in absence. You begin to understand that everything in life is a guest, and peace is the host. When guests come and go, the host remains. That host is your awareness, your unchanging presence. This realization is the essence of awakening. To live in this way is to move lightly through the world. You still feel deeply, love deeply, and care deeply, but you do not carry what is not yours. You participate fully in life while remaining anchored in peace. This is the paradox of the enlightened heart. It is both open and unattached, compassionate yet free. Every breath offers you a chance to practice release. Every exhale is a miniature letting go. You breathe in awareness, you breathe out resistance, you breathe in acceptance, you breathe out control, you breathe in love, you breathe out fear. The rhythm of life itself is teaching you the art of letting go. Each moment is an invitation to return to peace, to clear space, to open your hands, to soften your heart. When you truly embrace this path, you realize that nothing real can ever be lost. What you release was never yours in the first place. It was simply passing through. What belongs to you will find you effortlessly, not because you chase it, but because you have made space for it. In this state of trust, everything flows. You become like the river that does not resist the rocks, but flows around them, finding its way with grace. So remember this truth. What you release makes space for peace. The more you release, the more room peace has to dwell within you. And in that peace, you find the freedom, clarity, and joy that all spiritual seekers have been searching for since the beginning of time. If this message resonates with your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and continue walking this path of wisdom and inner peace with us. The next teachings will guide you even deeper into the art of living with freedom, awareness, and compassion. The inner alchemy of letting go, transforming suffering into stillness. There comes a point on every spiritual path where you realize that letting go is not merely a decision, but an alchemy. It is the quiet transformation of suffering into stillness, pain into wisdom, and resistance into peace. To the ordinary mind, letting go feels like losing, as though something valuable is being taken away. But in truth, letting go is the purification of the soul, the burning away of illusion so that only truth remains. It is the sacred fire through which the heart becomes light enough to rest in peace. What you release does not disappear. It returns to silence. And in that silence, peace begins to speak. The Buddha once said that clinging leads to suffering, just as holding a torch against the wind burns the hand that carries it. Most people live holding that torch, clinging to people, desires, identities, and emotions, wondering why they are in pain. To let go is to set the torch down. It does not mean you walk in darkness. It means you finally see by the light of awareness instead of the fire of attachment. This awareness is not cold or detached, but tender and awake. It sees everything exactly as it is and allows everything to flow through without resistance. This is the beginning of inner alchemy, the realization that nothing external needs to change for peace to arise. Only your relationship to experience must transform. The first stage of this transformation is awareness. Before you can release, you must see what you are holding. Much of human suffering comes from unconscious clinging, holding on to fears, resentments, and desires so tightly that they become invisible. Awareness shines light on the hidden grip. When you notice how much energy goes into maintaining old wounds or trying to control the uncontrollable, something within you begins to soften. Awareness itself is the solvent that dissolves attachment. You start to see that the pain you thought came from life's events actually comes from your resistance to them. The situation was never the prison, your attachment was the lock. Awareness turns the key. As this awareness deepens, you begin to see the patterns that govern your reactions. You notice how you grasp for validation when you feel unseen, how you replay the past when you feel insecure, how you chase control when uncertainty arises. Each of these is a form of attachment, a way the mind tries to protect itself from discomfort. But the more you cling, the more entangled you become. The Buddhist path teaches that the way out is not through struggle, but through seeing. When you see the pattern clearly, you are no longer inside it. You become the witness instead of the prisoner. That witnessing awareness is already free, already peaceful, already untouched by the storm. The next stage of letting go is acceptance. Many people mistake acceptance for agreement, but in Buddhist understanding, acceptance simply means allowing reality to be as it is. It is the cessation of argument with the present moment. When you stop resisting what already exists, your suffering begins to dissolve. The mind creates endless friction by insisting that life should be different than it is. But the universe has never once made a mistake in its unfolding. Everything is exactly where it needs to be in the great web of cause and effect. When you see this clearly, the urge to control softens, and a quiet trust begins to take root. This trust is not naive, it is born of wisdom. It knows that even the painful chapters serve a purpose in awakening consciousness. True release also requires forgiveness, and forgiveness is perhaps the highest form of letting go. It means you stop carrying the weight of what others have done to you. You recognize that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other to suffer. When you forgive, you release yourself from the emotional gravity of the past. You reclaim the energy that was bound to pain and redirect it toward peace. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is liberation. It is not an erasure of memory, but a transformation of meaning. You remember without bitterness. You understand without blame. You release not because they deserve freedom, but because you do. Once forgiveness begins to take root, something miraculous happens. The heart begins to open. For the first time, you experience compassion not as an effort, but as your natural state. The same people or situations that once triggered your pain now awaken understanding. You see that everyone is acting from their own level of consciousness, their own suffering, their own illusions. You see that anger, greed, and fear are simply different masks of confusion. When this understanding dawns, judgment dissolves, and love takes its place. This love is not sentimental. It is spacious. It allows everything to exist without needing to fix or control it. This is the essence of compassion, to love without conditions and to care without clinging. At this stage of release, you may begin to feel the subtle shifts in your inner energy. What was once heavy becomes light. What was once rigid becomes fluid. This is the alchemy of peace. In the beginning, it may feel disorienting, because the structures that once defined your identity are dissolving. You may not know who you are without your stories, your attachments, or your constant striving, but this uncertainty is sacred. It is the space where your true nature begins to reveal itself. Like a snake shedding its old skin, you are not losing yourself, you are uncovering your original form. The silence that follows is not emptiness, it is presence. It is the peace that has always been waiting behind the noise of becoming. As the process deepens, you begin to notice that life itself participates in your release. Situations that once frustrated you begin to lose their charge. People who once provoked you now pass through your awareness like clouds through the sky. You realize that it was never about changing them, but about dissolving the parts of you that reacted. The external world has not changed, yet your experience of it has transformed completely. This is the essence of Buddhist liberation. Not the removal of suffering from the world, but the awakening of awareness that transcends it. The world remains the same, but you no longer suffer because of it. In this state, every experience becomes a teacher. Pain shows you where you are still holding on. Joy shows you where you are open. Conflict reveals what needs to be healed. Silence reveals who you truly are. Everything is included in the path, nothing is wasted. Even suffering becomes sacred because it points you toward freedom. Once you understand this, you stop running from discomfort and start meeting it with curiosity. You see that what you resist persists, and what you embrace transforms. Letting go, then, becomes not an act of escape, but of intimacy with life itself. You learn to hold everything gently and to release it with grace when its time comes. The Buddhist masters often speak of the middle way, the path between clinging and aversion, between indulgence and suppression. This is where true release resides. It is not about rejecting the world or becoming numb to it. It is about engaging fully while remaining inwardly free. You can still love, work, dream, and create, but you do so without the chains of attachment. You give your heart without conditions and receive life without resistance. This balance is not achieved through force but through awareness. Awareness keeps you in harmony with the present, where peace always lives. As this awareness stabilizes, a profound stillness begins to permeate your being. It is not the absence of thought, but the absence of turbulence. You still think, feel, and act, but from a place of inner quiet. The mind becomes a servant rather than a master. It obeys awareness instead of commanding it. This stillness is not something you achieve. It is what remains when you stop interfering. It is the natural state of your consciousness when all attachments have been released. And once you taste it, even for a moment, you realize that nothing in the external world can compare. The entire search for happiness through achievement, validation, or control collapses in the face of this silence. You finally understand what the Buddha meant when he said that nirvana is the extinction of craving, the end of the inner fire that burns for what cannot satisfy. Letting go also changes your perception of time. When you are attached, you live in the future and the past, constantly revisiting old wounds or projecting new desires. But when you release, you return to the timeless present. This moment becomes enough. You begin to see that peace has always been available, not at the end of struggle, but in the pause between breaths. You no longer chase meaning, you embody it. You no longer chase love, you radiate it. You no longer chase peace, you are peace. The search ends not because you found something new, but because you stopped resisting what has always been. In this stillness, life begins to flow through you effortlessly. You become aligned with the rhythm of existence. You speak when needed, act when moved, and rest when called. There is no inner conflict because you no longer divide life into what should and should not be. You have surrendered the illusion of control, and in doing so you have gained freedom beyond understanding. Everything becomes sacred. The sound of the rain, the taste of food, the sensation of breathing. The ordinary reveals its extraordinary nature when the mind is quiet. Peace is no longer a distant goal, but the atmosphere in which you live. Letting go also reveals the interconnectedness of all things. When you release the illusion of separateness, you begin to see that you were never alone. The same life that moves the trees, the rivers, and the stars moves through you. When you let go of the small self, the one that says me and mine, you awaken to the vast self that encompasses everything. This realization is the ultimate release, the dissolving of the boundaries that create suffering. You see that there is nothing to defend, nothing to fear, and nothing to lose, because you were never separate from the whole. Peace is the recognition of this unity. But even after such glimpses of liberation, the mind will sometimes return to its old habits. It will cling again, fear again, and resist again. This too is part of the path. Each return is an invitation to deepen your practice, to remember that letting go is not an event, but a lifestyle. You do not let go once, you let go every day. With every breath you release the past. With every exhale you return to presence. The practice never ends because life never stops changing. And yet, over time, your capacity for surrender grows. You stop fighting the rhythm of impermanence and start dancing with it. This dance between holding and releasing becomes the poetry of awakening. You learn to move through life lightly, touching everything but gripping nothing. You can fully experience the beauty of the world because you're not trying to own it. You can love deeply because you are not afraid of loss. You can live freely because you are not trying to control outcomes. Each moment becomes enough. Each breath becomes sacred. And this is the heart of Buddhist peace. Not the promise of a world without change, but the realization of a heart that is unshaken by it. Letting go in its purest form is love. It is the highest form of love because it asks for nothing in return. It allows everything to exist and evolve according to its nature. It does not demand permanence, control, or perfection. It gives space for growth, for healing, for being. To release someone or something is to love it so deeply that you set it free. This freedom is not a loss, but an offering. It is the recognition that everything has its own path and timing. When you can love in this way without grasping, your love becomes infinite because it is no longer limited by attachment. It becomes the love of the awakened heart, the love that holds the entire world in silence. When you reach this level of surrender, you begin to see your suffering with compassion. Every heartbreak, disappointment, and loss that once tormented you now appears as a teacher. You understand that without pain, you would never have learned to release. Without darkness, you would never have sought the light. The very things you once tried to escape were the catalysts of your awakening. This realization fills you with gratitude, not only for the joy, but also for the sorrow. Gratitude becomes your natural state because you see life as a sacred unfolding rather than a series of problems. You no longer ask, "Why did this happen to me?" but instead, "What is this teaching me?" That shift in perception is the completion of the alchemy of letting go. Ultimately, letting go leads you to yourself, the self beyond name and form, beyond time and thought. The more you release, the more you uncover this silent presence within. You begin to see that what you were searching for in the world was always within you. The peace you sought from others was your own nature. The love you chased in the external was your own essence. The clarity you hoped to find in circumstances was the light of your own awareness. The journey of release ends where it began, here, now, within. When you finally rest in this realization, you understand that nothing can ever truly be lost because everything is already part of the same wholeness, so the teaching remains as simple as it is profound. What you release makes space for peace. Each act of surrender is an act of remembrance, returning you to who you have always been, pure awareness, boundless love, unshakable stillness. You do not need to perfect this process. You only need to practice it gently, moment by moment, breath by breath. Release what no longer serves. Release what weighs you down. Release what clouds your vision. And let the silence that follows reveal the peace that was always there. If this message touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and continue this journey of awakening and peace. Each new teaching is another step toward freedom, clarity, and the deep serenity that lies beyond all clinging. The path of surrender, finding peace in the flow of life. There is a sacred rhythm that governs all things, a natural flow that moves through every event, emotion, and breath. The Buddhist teaching of letting go is not separate from this rhythm. It is the art of moving with life instead of against it. When you surrender to the flow, you stop struggling to control what was never yours to command. You stop forcing outcomes and start trusting in the intelligence that already guides existence. This surrender is not a resignation or a collapse into passivity. It is an active opening of the heart, a decision to release resistance and let peace find its way through you. It is the ultimate letting go, the surrender of the illusion that you are the center of the universe and the beginning of realizing that you are part of it. Peace is not created by effort. It arrives when the storm of effort settles. For much of life, the human mind is trained to believe that effort equals progress, that control equals security, that desire equals purpose. But these are illusions. The river does not flow because it tries to flow. It flows because it cannot do otherwise. The same principle applies to your soul. The more you try to force life into your expectations, the more you move away from your natural rhythm. The more you let go, the more you align with the vast movement of existence. The river that surrenders to gravity never gets lost. It always reaches the ocean. The path of surrender begins with humility. To surrender is to recognize that you do not see the whole picture, that your understanding of life is limited by the narrow window of the ego. The ego believes it must manage, control, and protect. It believes peace will come only when everything bends to its will, but true wisdom sees through this illusion. Life is far greater than your personal preferences. What appears as chaos to the ego is order to the universe. What seems like loss to the mind is transformation to the soul. When you surrender, you stop insisting that you know what is best. You stop arguing with life and start listening. You start seeing that every experience, pleasant or painful, is part of a divine orchestration moving you toward awakening. At first, surrender feels uncomfortable because it threatens the ego's sense of control. The ego is terrified of letting go, for it survives through attachment. To release its grip feels like dying, and in a sense it is a death. The death of illusion, of false identity, of the belief that you are separate from life. But this death is sacred because it gives birth to peace. What dies is your suffering. What is born is your freedom. Every spiritual awakening is preceded by this surrender, by this moment of giving up the fight and allowing life to flow through you unresisted. When you begin to surrender, you notice how much of your inner struggle was self-inflicted. You see that your anxiety came not from uncertainty itself, but from your resistance to it. You see that your anger came not from what others did, but from your insistence that they should have acted differently. You see that your grief came not only from loss, but from your inability to accept impermanence. Surrender reveals that pain is not the problem, resistance is. When resistance ends, pain loses its power. It becomes a passing wave in the ocean of awareness. It moves through you, and peace remains. The Buddhist path to peace is a path of alignment. Surrender aligns you with the present moment, which is the only place where peace exists. The mind lives in time, replaying the past and rehearsing the future, but peace lives in timelessness. When you surrender to now, you step out of time's grip. You stop waiting for something to change and recognize that everything you've been seeking has always been here. The future you've been chasing is an illusion. The present is reality. When you inhabit this moment fully, peace does not need to be created, it is revealed. The act of surrender is not an escape from responsibility, but a return to wisdom. It allows you to act from clarity instead of reactivity. When the mind is trying to control life, every action is tainted by fear and expectation. But when you surrender, your actions arise naturally from presence. You respond instead of react. You move with grace instead of force. You speak with kindness instead of defensiveness. You begin to sense that life itself is moving through you, that you are a participant in something larger than your personal will. This realization is deeply freeing. It dissolves the tension between doing and being. You can work, create, love, and live fully, but without resistance, without the weight of control. Surrender also teaches you trust, and trust is the heartbeat of peace. Trust does not mean that you believe everything will go the way you want. It means you believe that whatever happens will carry wisdom, that life itself is trustworthy, even when it is not comfortable. This is the faith of the awakened heart. The faith that life is intelligent, that the universe is not random, that everything arises and passes at its appointed time. When you live in trust, you stop grasping, you stop pushing, you stop demanding that reality fit your plans. Instead, you open your hands and let life place in them whatever is meant to be there. You receive without greed and let go without fear. In moments of surrender, you may feel a stillness that is almost unearthly. It is not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of alignment. The mind quiets not because it has been silenced, but because it has been understood. You no longer need to think your way through life because you are now living from awareness. Thoughts still come, but they pass through like wind through bamboo, no longer clinging, no longer harming. The more you surrender, the less you are disturbed by the fluctuations of thought, emotion, and circumstance. The world may continue its noise, but your inner world remains untouched. This is peace, not the absence of sound, but the presence of silence within. Many people fear that surrender means losing their individuality, their ambition, or their direction. But the truth is that surrender gives these things depth and meaning. When you surrender, you do not lose your will. You align it with a greater will. Your desires become cleaner, your goals more harmonious, your energy more focused. The ego's desires are based on fear and lack. The soul's desires arise from love and connection. When you surrender, the two merge. You still move through life, but now your movement is graceful, effortless, and in tune with the whole. You stop chasing and start flowing. You stop forcing and start allowing. Surrender also transforms relationships. When you stop trying to control others, you make space for real love to emerge. You begin to see people as they are instead of as you want them to be. You release the need to change, fix, or save anyone. You understand that each soul has its own path and timing. This understanding brings enormous peace because it frees you from the burden of managing others' lives. It also allows you to love without conditions. Real love does not cling, it liberates. Real love does not possess, it allows. When you surrender your need to own love, love becomes infinite. In surrender, you also discover forgiveness, not just toward others, but toward yourself. The ego thrives on self-criticism and guilt, constantly measuring your worth against imagined ideals. But surrender shows you that you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. Wholeness includes both light and shadow, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability. When you surrender to your own humanity, you release the need to pretend. You stop chasing approval and begin to rest in authenticity. The peace that arises from self-acceptance is unshakable because it is not dependent on anyone's validation. There is a story of a monk who carried water from a river every day for years using a cracked pot. One day, the pot apologized for leaking. The monk smiled and said, "Don't you see the flowers that have grown along the path because of your cracks?" This is the wisdom of surrender. It teaches you to stop fighting your flaws and start seeing their hidden purpose. Every imperfection, every mistake, every loss is part of the tapestry of awakening. When you surrender the idea that you must be flawless, you begin to see beauty in the cracks, just as light shines more beautifully through broken glass. To surrender is to say yes to life as it is, not a passive yes, but a wholehearted one. It is the yes that says, even this belongs, even this moment, even this feeling, even this uncertainty. This yes is powerful because it transforms everything it touches. Resistance turns pain into suffering, but acceptance turns pain into wisdom. When you stop fighting the present, it stops fighting you. Life ceases to feel like a battle and begins to feel like a conversation. You listen, respond, and flow. You move with the rhythm of existence instead of against it. Surrender is the culmination of letting go. At first, you release individual attachments, objects, relationships, desires, beliefs, but eventually, you are called to release the one who is releasing, the very sense of I that claims ownership over the process. This is the deepest surrender, the surrender of the self. It is the realization that there is no separate you holding on to life. There is only life itself expressing through you. This realization dissolves fear because fear belongs only to the separate self. When the sense of separation falls away, peace becomes effortless. There is no one left to protect, no one left to defend, no one left to control. There is only awareness resting in itself. When surrender reaches this depth, even death loses its sting. You see that death is not the end, but the ultimate act of letting go. Every breath you take prepares you for it. Every exhale is a rehearsal for the final release. In this way, surrender becomes the most natural thing in the world. It is simply cooperation with the eternal law of impermanence. Everything arises, everything falls, and everything returns to the source. Peace comes from aligning with this rhythm instead of resisting it. To live in surrender is to live without anxiety about what comes next. You begin to trust that each moment will reveal what is needed when it is needed. You stop grasping at answers and start living the questions. You move with patience, guided by intuition rather than fear. This patience is not laziness. It is strength. It is the strength of knowing that the universe does not rush, and yet everything unfolds on time. The seed does not force itself to bloom. The moon does not hurry to become full. Why should you? When you surrender, you live in harmony with the same intelligence that governs the stars. In this state, gratitude blossoms effortlessly. You begin to thank life not only for what it gives, but also for what it takes away. You realize that every loss was a clearing, every ending a doorway, every silence a message. Gratitude and surrender walk hand in hand because both are forms of acceptance. The grateful heart is already surrendered, for it sees blessing in everything. And the surrendered heart is already grateful, for it no longer divides life into good and bad, gain and loss. It sees only the sacred. Over time, surrender changes your entire perception of existence. You begin to see that life has never been against you. It has always been for your awakening. Every challenge was a mirror showing you where you were still holding on. Every heartbreak was a teacher showing you where you were still afraid to love. Every failure was a lesson showing you where you were still trying to control. When you surrender, you stop blaming life and start learning from it. You become a student of existence, open, humble, and awake. Surrender does not mean you never act or dream or desire. It means you act from clarity, dream without attachment, and desire without dependence. You still move toward goals, but your peace no longer depends on achieving them. You can walk toward your vision while being fully content with where you are. This paradox, contentment with movement, is the heart of enlightened living. You do not need to choose between ambition and peace because they no longer conflict. When your actions arise from surrender, they are guided by peace rather than motivated by lack. At the highest level of surrender, even the distinction between surrender and non-surrender disappears. There is no one left to surrender, no object to surrender to. There is only life flowing through itself. Awareness becomes aware of itself. The dance continues, but there is no dancer. The wind blows, but there is no I moving it. This is the ultimate peace. Not something you reach, but something that has always been here once illusion dissolves. In the end, surrender is not a practice you perform, but a recognition of what already is. Life has always been unfolding without your permission. The heart beats, the breath flows, the planets move, all without your control. When you realize this, you laugh at the idea that you were ever in charge. And in that laughter, the final layer of resistance melts away. You rest in being, in silence, in peace. So the path of surrender is the path of returning home, to the flow, to the stillness, to the love that was never absent. When you surrender, you do not fall apart, you fall into place. You realize that the universe was never asking you to fight it. It was only asking you to trust it. What you release makes space for peace, and what you surrender allows that peace to stay. If this teaching speaks to your heart, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and continue this journey with us. Each new reflection will take you deeper into peace, awareness, and the art of surrendering to the flow of life. Returning to the center, the peace that remains after letting go. There comes a point in the journey of release when everything that once defined you begins to dissolve. The fears that shaped your choices, the desires that once ruled your mind, the attachments that bound your heart, all slowly fade into silence. What remains is something untouched, something vast and still, something that was never lost but merely hidden beneath layers of resistance. This is the peace that does not depend on circumstances. It is the stillness at the center of existence, the unshaken ground beneath the waves of experience. When everything else falls away, peace remains, not because you earned it, but because it is what you are. To reach this center, you must pass through many layers of illusion. The first illusion is that peace will come from fixing the world. The second is that peace will come from fixing yourself. The third, and perhaps the most subtle, is that peace will come from reaching a particular state of mind. All these illusions arise from the same misunderstanding, that peace is somewhere else, later, after, beyond. The truth is that peace is not something you reach. It is something you return to. It has never left you, only your attention left it. The path of letting go, then, is not a path of addition, but of subtraction. It is the gradual removal of everything that obscures your natural state. When the Buddha spoke of nirvana, he was not describing a faraway paradise, but the extinguishing of the fire of craving. Nirvana is not a reward. It is a return. It is the moment when the struggle ceases, when the mind no longer burns with the desire to make reality different than it is. That cessation reveals a peace so profound that words fail to describe it. This peace does not come and go. It is not affected by gain or loss, pleasure or pain, success or failure. It is the peace that remains after the noise fades, after the story ends, after the self dissolves. The mind fears this silence because it equates stillness with emptiness. It asks, if I let go of everything, what will be left? The answer, whispered by every awakened being throughout time, is simple. Everything real will be left. You will not lose yourself. You will lose only what you are not. You will not lose life. You will lose only illusion. What you release is the mask. What remains is the truth. The peace that follows is not empty but full, full of presence, awareness, and the quiet joy of being. As you begin to live from this center, life continues to unfold as before. The seasons change, relationships evolve, joy and sorrow visit as they always have, but something fundamental shifts in how you relate to it all. You are no longer the storm, you are the sky. You no longer chase after pleasure or run from pain. You no longer fight against impermanence. Instead, you witness everything arise and pass with equanimity. You understand that joy and sorrow are not opposites but twins, each pointing you back to the same source. Every emotion, every experience becomes a wave reminding you of the ocean you are. Living from this peace does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means participating fully, but without attachment. You work, love, speak, and create, but you do so from stillness, not from craving. Your actions arise naturally, not from the compulsion to prove or to control. You no longer act to complete yourself because you see that you were never incomplete. This way of being is effortless, because it aligns with the natural flow of existence. Just as the sun shines without trying and the tree grows without effort, you begin to live without strain. You move through life as life itself, and in that movement there is profound peace. This peace is not fragile. It is not dependent on meditation, isolation, or perfect circumstances. It is not disturbed by noise or chaos or uncertainty. It exists even in the midst of suffering because it is deeper than suffering. It is the background of awareness upon which all experiences appear. Imagine a vast ocean beneath turbulent waves. The surface may rise and fall, but the depths remain still. Your consciousness is that depth. The waves are your thoughts, emotions, and circumstances, but they never disturb the bottomless stillness beneath. When you identify with the waves, you suffer. When you remember you are the ocean, you are free. Many people mistake peace for numbness, but true peace is the opposite of indifference. It is aliveness without turmoil. It is love without fear. It is clarity without resistance. It does not dull your emotions, it refines them. You feel everything, but nothing owns you. You can weep without despair and laugh without grasping. You can love deeply without clinging and lose without collapsing. Peace gives you the courage to face life fully because you know that no experience can take away your center. This peace also transforms the way you perceive others. When you are no longer lost in your own suffering, you begin to see the suffering of others with compassion rather than judgment. You recognize yourself in them, the same fears, the same longings, the same search for safety. You realize that everyone is doing their best within the limits of their awareness. This realization births compassion naturally, not as a moral duty, but as a reflection of understanding. You stop trying to change people and start seeing them. You stop needing to forgive because there is nothing to forgive. There is only understanding. Compassion is peace made visible. The mind will occasionally pull you away from this peace. Old habits of worry, anger, or desire may resurface, trying to reclaim their power. But now you see them for what they are, passing clouds, not permanent truths. You do not resist them, you watch them. You let them come and go without getting lost in their stories. Over time, even the strongest waves lose their force because they are no longer fueled by your attention. The more you return to awareness, the weaker the patterns of resistance become. Eventually, they dissolve entirely, leaving only the quiet brilliance of the present moment. Peace also changes your relationship with time. When you live from the center, the past loses its grip and the future loses its urgency. You stop replaying old wounds or rehearsing new fears. You realize that every moment of peace exists only here and now. This realization does not make you careless about the future. It simply frees you from being enslaved by it. You can plan, dream, and act, but your sense of being remains anchored in the eternal now. This presence becomes your refuge, your home, your temple. To live in this state does not mean life stops testing you. The storms of existence continue, but you no longer drown in them. You float, you flow, you breathe. You remain calm even when the surface is chaotic. Others may wonder how you stay so serene while everything around you changes. And you will find it difficult to explain, because this peace cannot be taught through words. It must be experienced, it must be lived. You will know it not by understanding, but by being. This peace is self-sustaining because it does not depend on external conditions. It arises from alignment with truth. When you stop fighting reality, reality supports you. When you stop seeking, you find. When you stop grasping, you receive. Every spiritual master has pointed to this same paradox. The more you let go, the more life gives you. The more you stop trying to hold on, the more everything you need flows toward you. This is not magic or luck, but natural law. Resistance blocks the current. Surrender opens it. When your heart is open, life moves through you effortlessly, and what you once called miracles become everyday occurrences. The path back to this center often requires deep honesty. You must face your own illusions, the stories you tell to protect yourself, the beliefs you cling to, the fears you refuse to acknowledge. Letting go of these can feel like losing everything familiar, but remember, you are not losing anything real. You are only releasing what was never truly you. The peace that remains is not new. It has been waiting beneath the noise of self-deception. You do not need to create it. You only need to uncover it. Every act of release is an act of remembering who you are. Sometimes this uncovering happens slowly, through years of practice, reflection, and silence. Other times it happens suddenly, through a loss, a heartbreak, a moment of surrender so total that the ego cannot survive it. In those moments, when life strips you bare, when you have nothing left to hold on to, peace enters uninvited. You realize that the collapse you feared was grace in disguise. What broke you was never punishment, it was liberation. The destruction of illusion always feels like suffering until you see the freedom beneath it. Once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you awaken, even briefly, to your true nature, you can never again fully believe in your false one. The peace that follows awakening is gentle, but powerful. It does not shout or demand attention. It moves quietly, Like the wind through the trees or the tide against the shore. It guides you softly, always toward truth. You begin to notice synchronicities, intuitive insights, and effortless alignments. Life starts to cooperate with your inner stillness. Challenges still come, but they no longer shake you. You face them with clarity because your foundation is no longer fragile. You have returned to the center. This return is the essence of Buddhist practice, not to escape the world, but to see through it, not to destroy the self, but to realize its emptiness. When you know you are not the body, not the thoughts, not the emotions, not even the story you call me, you awaken to what you truly are, pure awareness, infinite and free. From that awareness, peace radiates naturally. You do not have to protect it because nothing can threaten it. You do not have to maintain it because it is your essence. You simply have to stop covering it with the noise of resistance. The awakened life is simple, but not easy. It requires constant remembering, constant returning. The world will try to pull you back into identification with roles, possessions, opinions, and fears. But the moment you remember your center, you are free again. Even one breath of awareness can bring you home. You do not need to renounce the world. You only need to renounce your resistance to it. You can be in the marketplace and still be at peace. You can face chaos and still be calm. You can engage with the world and still remain anchored in silence. This is true freedom, to be in the world but not of it. The more you rest in peace, the more you begin to serve others naturally. You become a presence of calm in a world of noise, a source of stability in a sea of confusion. You do not need to preach or convert. Your silence speaks louder than words. People feel peace around you because you carry no hidden demands, no judgments, no attachments. You are simply there, fully, completely, openly. In your presence, others remember their own stillness. In this way, your peace becomes contagious, spreading quietly from one heart to another. This peace is the greatest gift you can offer the world, because the world's suffering is born from resistance, from the refusal to let go. When you live from peace, you show that it is possible to live differently. You become a living teaching, a mirror of what others can be. You remind them that happiness does not come from control, but from release, not from perfection, but from acceptance, not from grasping, but from surrendering. You remind them that what they are seeking has never been missing, it has always been within. In the end, the journey of letting go is not about becoming something else, but about coming home. You return to the simplicity of being, to the ease of breath, to the quiet awareness that watches all things come and go. You see that life does not need to be fixed. It only needs to be seen, and in that seeing, peace arises naturally. The Buddha called this the end of suffering, but it might just as well be called the beginning of love. The love that has no opposite, the love that does not cling, the love that simply is. So let this be your reminder. Everything you release brings you closer to this peace. Every moment of surrender returns you to your center. Every breath is an opportunity to let go a little more and to rest a little deeper in what has always been here. Do not wait for the world to be still before you find stillness. Be still now, and the world will follow. This is the highest teaching of letting go, the realization that peace is not something you enter, it is something you remember. You are not on your way to peace. You are peace, remembering itself. If this message speaks to your soul, subscribe to the channel and stay with us on this journey. Each new reflection will take you deeper into the heart of awareness, reminding you again and again that what you release makes space for peace, and that peace has always been yours.